Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining me. This is Natalie Stillwell from So Goes the Future, and we are talking in this series about issues concerning sexual identity. And today I have with me a speaker you might remember from the Forming the Future series, Miss Liesbet Bickett, and she's coming to us from the West Coast today. And one of her expertise is, and her passions is compassionate communication, or something also called nonviolent communication. But I know there's more, and you're working on some other exciting projects. So I'd love if you could share a little bit about yourself and your connection to, building bridges between people.
Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for having me here. I'm really happy to be talking to you again. And I'm really appreciating you wanting to have conversations about this subject. So thank you. Um, yeah, so one of the main things I do is coach people and couples and families, and even going into businesses around communication. And my focus is nonviolent communication or compassionate communication. And so basically with that, my goal is helping people use their words and use their communications to build relationships, to just maximize the possibilities in their life and to experience the life that they want. So nonviolent communication is really a needs-based communication style. It's based on the principle that we're all doing the best that we can at every moment to meet some life-giving need that we can all connect with. And so, when we connect on the level of strategies, like how we meet that need, that's where we find conflict. But when we connect on that level of need, like we all need food and water and air to survive. When we connect on that level, that's a level where we can really understand each other. How we get the food and water and air, that might be a little bit, we might have some different ideas about that, but that we all need it, we can all agree on that. And so it's really appropriate for, I think, for this conversation, because again, we're going to kind of be looking at, what's that, just that understanding that everybody's doing the best they can right now, to live the best life that they can. And so kind of trying to connect on that level is a good place to start. Yeah. And I think that the other kind of framing it as nonviolent communication, especially for this conversation, little difference between nonviolence and kind of compassion. Compassion doesn't have as much energy and as much, I don't know, it doesn't call for maybe as much courage. It is there, but when we talk about violence or trying to avoid violence, definitely kind of brings forward that reality of that sometimes that's going to really take a lot of courage, and it definitely takes action. And around this conversation, we're talking about some pretty vulnerable places and areas where a lot of these conversations haven't been had before. So it definitely takes a lot of courage and creating safe spaces for people to be able to share. If you look at the news right now, we're talking about people, people's lives are basically at risk if they have this conversation, or if they're wanting to come forward with a reality that's theirs, they may actually die. So yeah, so this isn't only emotional courage for their emotional identity, but also for their physical body. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it's definitely being mindful of that if we're wanting to open a conversation with somebody who I think that we were in particular talking about transgender, that wanting to open a conversation with somebody who's identifying that way, that we are actually asking them to possibly risk their life to have a conversation with us. That may be where they're coming from. And so that takes a lot of tenderness and care to be in that conversation.
And you're referring to just like, persecution and physical violence that does happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if, recognizing that when we're in a conversation with somebody, that even if, you and I, like you're not a threat to me. We have a relationship, and I know that. But I may come into this conversation, no matter how wonderful and compassionate and loving and caring a person you are, I could come into a conversation with a huge history behind me that I'm still going to be fearing for my safety, even though you're the most safe person that I could be talking to. And so recognizing that people bring all their stories with them, and so they may not be operating in the same environment that we are. So I could be sitting in a room with somebody, but the room that they're sitting in, because it's full of their stories, is completely different than the room that I'm sitting in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much about our perceptions. But this is where I'm so excited to bring you into our series, is just learning how to get vulnerable and get real and connect human to human, so that we can have a conversation that really is going to be fulfilling and meaningful. Because, as a Christian woman, and I feel bad that a lot of times in the debate about these topics, maybe some of us lose sight of the compassion and the connection component. But that is very much our calling too, as being representatives of Christ in this world, which is, of course, how we see things, that, we are bringing his penetrating gaze and his love, and, it's an enveloping, warm, safe place. And it doesn't hide from sharing maybe painful truths or requirements of us, but it's a safe, loving, pure kind of an encounter. So I really hope we can kind of tease that out in our time together. And before we started recording, we were discussing that this particular interview might actually kind of be reverse of the typical interview, where you ask me more questions. So I think maybe a good starting out place would just be sharing my why for wanting to do a series on issues related to sexual identity.
So tell me.
Okay. So there's so many facets to the why behind this series. One is just, my personal journey from growing up sort of nominally Christian, practically atheist, and then having all these conversion experiences, and now I'm like uber Catholic. And so I just have a drive and a passion to understand what is true in the world, and how am I supposed to live and interact with the realities of this world. So I do bring with me a set of beliefs and values around the meaning of our sexual identity as male and female, and sex itself and marriage and all that sort of thing. So it's important for me, my intellectual and spiritual groundedness, that I can really explore this difficult topic in an honest way, and be able to really just honestly put the questions and concerns and views out there, and sift through for what's true and what brings the kind of peace that truth brings, So that's one aspect.
Okay, so can I just kind of sum that up and see if I'm hearing you?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm just going to kind of be transparent also, is that what I'm going to try and model is how I would have a conversation with somebody who, I may or may not share beliefs with, is really wanting, I'm coming to this space with you, Natalie, really wanting to understand and hear you, and also really wanting to get the most that we can connection and understanding in general out of this conversation. And so when I hear you talk about why this matters to you, I want to reflect back to you, because number one, I want to make sure that I heard what you wanted me to hear. And I want you to know, in doing that, that hopefully helps you know that you matter and what you're saying matters to me. And yeah, I do want to gain the understanding that you're hoping that I would gain. So that's why if I'm talking to somebody and they're telling me about, this is something deep, I'm going to even stop them and say, hey, can I check in with you and make sure that I heard you? Because this really matters and I do want to understand. So that's the transparency part about, what I'm doing in the conversation. So yeah, what I heard is that I heard that you've been on a real journey of discovery of not, it's personal discovery, but it's bigger than that. It's a soulful discovery. So it's a discovery of identity and place in the world, and also a journey of, what is this world and why are we all here, and how can we make this a better place? How can we, really show up in this world the way, really being authentic to the purpose and the meaning that brought us here. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things I heard, that you're on that journey. Is that kind of...
Yeah.
And this is a part of that. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I heard about this conversation is that you have beliefs that I'm guessing might be the beliefs, the way you understand them might be in contradiction with kind of your current understanding of how other people are presenting or living. And so there's a little bit of a conflict there. And at the same time, part of your authenticity is to really show up with compassion and love and acceptance of people. And so, like, how to navigate that conflict, and what is your truth and what is the truth, and just really wanting to explore that, because you really care about people, and you really care about not only about people, but being this kind of representative and a leader in this belief system that you have, and in showing up for God and for His purpose, His greater purpose. And so is that, am I getting kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another element of wanting to do a series discussing sexual identity is I've been through a really scary health journey too the last 5 or 6 years. And I have experienced things in my body that doctors would just look at me sideways and tell me I need psychiatric medication. And instead of hearing the reality of what I'm experiencing, because they don't understand the why or how that it could be happening. And to be dismissed and to not have the help that you're desperately seeking for something you're truly experiencing is very scary and very disempowering. And I feel a certain connection with people who are experiencing realities intimately in their body that other people don't understand, and that other people may dismiss or insult or abandon them because of that.
Wow, that's really just, thank you for sharing that. See, that just really makes sense to me. And what a great connection. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Another component, and I'm really grateful for this, when I was experiencing an unplanned, unwed pregnancy, I had one mom friend who really came to the forefront for me. And I can't say we were especially close. We knew each other through like the natural health crunchy mom world. And she just stepped forward. She gave me so many things that I needed, just insights in how to even take care of a child, but also material goods. And her love and her there's no judgment coming from her. It was so necessary to help me survive such a difficult time in my own life. And it was a soothing balm for other wounds, that I might have experienced from the way other people reacted to me, or just dealing with, the health issues on top of this unexpected circumstance. And she shared with me that her oldest son, her firstborn son, whenever I would meet him, I could tell that he was different. He was often wearing girl clothes. And she eventually shared with me that he, since he was able to ever make choices, always gravitated towards traditionally girly, feminine things, Disney princesses, dolls, babies, that sort of thing, wearing sparkly clothes, and even eventually just asking, like, can I have a princess gown and this and that. And she overheard one day, her and her husband were trying to make sense of it, and she overheard her son explaining to his little sister one day. She's like, are you a boy or a girl? And he said to the effect, well, in my brain and in my heart, I'm a girl, but for some reason, my body is a boy body. And like, seriously, it's so hard not to cry when I think about it. Like, how terrible, like, who wants to be stuck in a circumstance where everything in their body is wired in one direction, but their body otherwise is sort of in conflict with that, and it's putting them in a situation where they're going to experience a lot of external conflicts coming at them, and attacks and misunderstandings on top of their own internal conflicts. And so I just find that to be like such a sad and terrible thing to have to deal with, but it is a reality that many people are dealing with. And I'm sure that my mom friend had no idea this was on her trajectory in life, and she has just had to confront this. So that is really the other catalyst for wanting to explore this specific topic, to just bring all these components together in a way where we can move forward fully, in a fully human way.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. What I'm sensing is that there must be some kind of inner conflict in you about this, because what I'm hearing, you're coming to it very open, and there's something else inside of you're working with.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean,
What is that?
I think there are a lot of fears around having this conversation. Maybe part of it is when I was growing up, there was no free discussion about important topics like this. There was no intelligent and non-judgmental discussion about this or about anything being specifically true and meaningful in life. And so, my earliest foundation was don't talk about that, or someone will yell at you or hit you, because it's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So I bring a certain fear to the table where I feel like I want to have deeper friendships with other people who are experiencing sexual identity confusion and struggles, and the moms who have children who are struggling with that. And I want to be able to talk with, fellow Christians or other people who maybe have very strong beliefs that there's no such thing as a transgender experience, that it's all a psychological problem, and it's a free choice. And I'm not saying there aren't free choices within how you handle that experience, but that's just from what I can see too far. There's a lot more that we have to just really be honest and open about. And all truth really is God's truth, is the perspective I have. So there's really no fear in unpacking the reality and facing it as it is, even if it doesn't fit into what helps us to feel more comfortable to say, oh, it's just a psychological problem. It's just an issue of poor choices,
Well, what I'm hearing is that the fear that you have is more around having conversations with people who might have that belief that this is just psychological, it's just a choice, that you're wanting to actually facilitate bridging conversations and connection and more like peace and safety for everybody. And so you're kind of in that bridge where you can connect with both sides of that discussion, and that your fear is around the conversations with maybe the people who don't believe that these people actually have real pain and real suffering and real needs to address, and that you're wanting to be able to talk to them about this topic, even though it might be kind of scary, like you said, like when you were a kid. Is that right? Is that where your fear is?
That's definitely one of the components is, I as a human being, I don't want to be judged as, not being orthodox in my faith because other people have a very rigid understanding of certain aspects of this conversation. And I feel like I want to really shed more light on, hey, there's a biochemical reality. We're a body soul unit. This isn't all just in people's heads. This isn't all just an issue of abusing their free will. Like there are real physical components at work here that we have to find a way to speak to, that is going to be liberating for the person experiencing it, instead of ostracizing them. And so that's the other side of my fear is I don't want it to be the one that makes other people feel ostracized. And I know in my journey over the years, and I lament that I didn't have, parents who were able to form me in such a way that I could communicate so easily with everyone about all these topics, but it's okay because it's been a journey and now I get to own it and learn it for myself. And that's a beautiful journey, as hard as it is. But when I hope to interview my mom friend that I mentioned for this series, and I have fear about approaching her and having the conversation because I know there's a lot of really raw emotion and pain on her side. She does not want her child to feel like, and I'm just going to say she and refer to her child as a daughter, because that's the way that they have chosen. So she wants her daughter to be safe, to be able to live authentically who she feels she is. And I get that, but it's hard to bring to the table an idea that, well, maybe, just maybe, because we're all called to chastity, your daughter won't be able to get married one day and have children in the way that other people do, because there's not really a clear natural law, morally acceptable sort of way for that to unfold. Or maybe even perhaps, and I'm not saying I completely espouse this view, but maybe perhaps you ought not to encourage your daughter to be living as a daughter. It's just, again, I'm wanting to flesh out all the details of what does my faith say here, in more explicit, moral theology sort of terms, but also how do we talk to someone living that reality with all the painful emotions behind? How dare you imply that my child can't live a full life and have all the same things that I got to have? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two conversations that have fear. One is the one with the let's say just a fellow Christian Catholic who has a really strong beliefs about this and really isn't even willing to consider the biological, what might be happening biologically in this person. So there's the fear there of being judged. I'm hearing just, like being judged for not being a good Catholic and not representing, not bringing that forward. And then the fear on the other side is to, like with your mom friend, is to not to ostracize her, not to ostracize her whole experience and her, and her daughter, how we're referring to her. And at the same time, I hear that there's something else that you want. There's some kind of guidance that you might be wanting to offer there. So what I'm thinking is that might be helpful here is to just talk about the two different spectrums of those conversations a little bit, and and how you might go into each of those conversations, because they're very different, right? In some ways, and in other ways, they're not different at all. So how does that sound to you?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
If I can, though, I wanted to interject. I have one other sort of experience that comes to the table too. I in my previous job, one of my coworkers is a trans woman, so biologically male, identifies as a female, and lives as a female. And so I really longed to have a connection and a relationship and get to know this coworker. But even though I never overtly shared anything about my being a Christian or any sort of views on morality explicitly, I think that she intuited, or maybe somehow just came into the know. And before I had a chance to even really get to know this coworker, I felt a wall come straight up. And we were never really able to move forward with a real friendship after that. And I just really didn't even know how to go about breaching a conversation. Because the first time I encountered this coworker, again, I'll say she was very open about being transgender and was very proud of it. And really in your face, honestly, about it. But I could see there was a need and a desire to share it and to want to be accepted and to have some affirmation. So I just focused on just listening and responding with kindness and not sharing any sort of response, because I didn't want to have a wall built. I wanted a chance to really get to know this person. But so that's another area where there's, my story coming to the table. There's some pain where it's like, oh, people are going to build walls, even though it's important to me to have connection. But it's also important to me to be authentic to my pursuit of what is true and what is good for us, and what are the overarching realities that, should be guiding us so that we can have the happiest life here and in the next life. So just throwing that out there too.
There's three conversations. Yeah. And do you have, is there one that you're more drawn to look at to start with?
I suppose I would say, talking with my mom friend who's living the reality of having a trans child.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
Yeah, that means a lot to me, to be able to go deep there and to learn and to listen, and to really maintain some sort of a real friendship too.
Okay, so that starts to go into what my first question really is in what is it that you're wanting to have happen as a result of this conversation or these conversations? What is it that really matters to you? And so I heard you really want to honor your friendship. Yeah. So just go ahead and repeat again, and whatever else. What is it that really matters to you around this conversation?
I think a big thing is that I want the story that she has and the stories that she also knows from all the other parents. And she's become a trans child activist, basically. And I get that. Because we love our kids and we want them to be safe and we want them to be happy. I want her story to be heard in a forum that is couched in, there are certain truths that dictate how we ought to live. And it's okay, there's space within there to just talk about the reality of what's going on and not be afraid and have to make judgments right away, because we need to find solid, stable ground, because it's rocking our world too much to listen to it. And I want to bring that conversation into the more Christian-oriented world in a way that they can understand and relate to. So, bring it in a compassionate way. Like, hey, here's the reality. This is the suffering that people are facing. So I think that's a huge component for me in wanting to have the dialogue.
So wanting to have the dialogue about kind of the reality of her experience, and in the context of this belief system that has, that has these truths. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing is you're really wanting her experience to be heard, her personal experience, and what it's like. And I see that as a place where I don't see how anybody can, I mean, people can do whatever they want, but but really, I don't see that there can be any conflict with any kind of belief system of truths if you're just asking somebody about their personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because then you're just asking, like, what is this like inside of you? What's this like in your body? What's this like in your heart? And so that can't be in conflict with any universal truth, because it's just my personal experience. It doesn't contain any judgments about what it means.
Mm-hmm.
There's no stories there about what this means for anybody. It's just my own thoughts and my own fears. And so that's where I would start and really guide, I guess, the conversation. If it's a conversation that you're wanting others who don't identify as openly and as willingly as you, if you're wanting others to listen and gain something from it, then, asking questions like, what did you, when you first started to notice these behaviors, what were your first thoughts about it?
Mm-hmm.
And what were your first fears, and what are your fears now? And what's been the hardest thing for you?
Mm-hmm.
And who do you see this affecting, and how do you see them affected? And what are you hoping for your child? What are you hoping for their future? Kind of going to those needs, like how do you want to support your child, and what are you hoping that your child gets to experience in their life? And so trying to keep it as personal as possible, to really bring out the humanity of, this is just a woman's personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that she's dealing with, no matter what the context is that she's dealing with. And those belief systems that you're talking about are going to come up. Her fears probably are tied to some of those, but as much as possible, keeping it to to kind of what her fears are about the stories,
Mm-hmm.
and how they're going to affect her child, rather than the stories themselves and whether they're true or not.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
And I think that's a big thing that I want to be, come to the table from that interview, which I hope will happen, is what are the human fears, and that any mom could relate to. Any of us could understand and have compassion in that situation. But then my fears come up with, okay, so how has this impacted your view of, your faith and moral principles? And, how can, in a sense, how can we be friends and love and support each other as much as possible, while also knowing that, I have certain beliefs. And I want to say too, like, part of the series is, to my knowledge at this moment, the Catholic Church doesn't have like hard and fast teachings about, how a person with gender identity struggles should live in minute detail. It's more or less like we're all called to chastity. Now, what does that mean for the person who is living this reality? How can we help them have as much wholeness as possible in light of God's intention that there be male and female, but in light also of the reality that we live in a broken world, including a biologically broken world where things don't go the way they may have been initially intended. So I have fear about bringing that conversation to the table with someone who's living the reality and has all their stories and their fears. So it's like, how can we just talk with each other civilly and say, hey, like, I really do have these certain beliefs and I'm still fleshing out exactly how they would apply, but I feel like I need to be able to be authentic about myself and my stories, as well as to hear your story authentically and love you as much as I can and support you in the ways that I feel, according to my conscience, that I really can. So
yeah, right. So what I'm hearing is that you have your truth and you don't want to have to hide them. And yeah. And so a couple things that are coming up for me. The first one that's coming up for me, like if I were you and thinking about this conversation, is really first there's this question of, are you willing, what is your number one priority? Is it to maintain the friendship and maintain communication? And so take care of the relationship however it needs to take care of, so that you can continue to have a relationship. And so even if this person decides to live in a way that isn't in alignment with your own values, make some decisions. Are you still wanting and willing to have a relationship with this person? So I think that's a really important question to ask
that's a very
yourself.
good question. I guess the way I see it is, I always want to have a good, positive, and loving connection with the people in my life. But I realize sometimes, because of various circumstances and what we all bring to the table, sometimes there can't really be an intimate friendship. I just want to know that I'm doing my part to be a good friend, and to be loving and supportive and understanding, but also without any sense of obligation or expectation that it's going to be the deepest of friendships. Because I do have, I bring also to the table like my philosophical studies and the ideas about, the greatest friendships revolve around a shared vision of, pursuing what is good and true and that sort of thing, instead of just a utilitarian or a pleasure-based sort of friendship. And so I don't want, the friendship at the cost of, what I consider to be true, and integrity within myself towards that. But I do want to know I'm doing my part to be loving and to be present and to be available, and supportive to the degree that I can, and then just let it go from there, depending on how, my friend or anyone else in a circumstance like this chooses to respond.
So, and I think that a part of that in any part, like you said, in any relationship, so even in this interview or this conversation that you're going to have, is to care for the other person, to have compassion, to care for them, and to create a safe space in the interactions that you have. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so I really believe so strongly in transparency and vulnerability, and that's really the place to start. And especially in a case like this where, I'm wanting to have this conversation and really being transparent with the other person about where I'm coming from and the position that I'm coming from. Mm-hmm. And so I would want to let her know, this is why I want to have this is what I'm hoping to get out of this conversation. And these are the fears that I have. And I have these truths, and I just owning, like, I'm coming from a place where your child living in this particular way it's not in alignment with my beliefs. Um, and so are you willing to have a conversation with me and really be vulnerable with me, knowing that that's where I'm coming from? Or I would want to really give the space for this person to know the conversation that they're entering into. And then I would want to, if the answer is yes, then I would want to know, well, what is it that I really want to take care of you and our just our space during this conversation. So what is it that you need in order to be respected? Like, what does that look, what's that going to look for you? This is a person who is actually living this experience. This is her life. And so to really make sure that you're not using her experience for your own agenda is just, to me, like, that's what's authentically coming up for me. Mm-hmm. is to make sure that she's entering into this with full knowledge, and that she gets to also direct the conversation and have a say in how it goes. Mm-hmm. And so asking, what is it that you're needing to be safe and to have this conversation be supportive for you? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, these are really, really great suggestions. Thank you so much for giving me specifics that I can bring to the table. You know, we're all going to encounter people who have a variety of experiences related to sexual identity. And, you know, our kids are going to go to school with children like my friend's, you know, daughter, who is a trans daughter, and that sort of thing. So having a conversation with someone like my coworker, or like, I don't know, a trans parent maybe that we meet of a child our kids go to school with, or something like that. What's some guidance you could give as far as building bridges and having conversations? Because I know one of my fears was, I know that this person wants me to ask them questions about being transgender and saying, like, I'm an open book, whatever you want to know. And I didn't want to seem voyeuristic, or I didn't want to get into areas where my sort of like moral compass would start doing this, and then they would get uncomfortable. And so I don't know. It's just so hard to be like, oh, I really want to have a connection here, and I do want to understand, but it's like I have a bunch of fears coming to the table too about how to engage with you, you know?
Yeah. So number one, I would say, again, kind of, you know, very similar to this other conversation, is to first see this person as a human being, and really have that be the biggest thing, because it's important not to objectify people. And I think that can really happen very quickly. And like, oh, here's this trans person, I can ask them all of these questions, and mm-hmm. and I don't know how to be their friend because they're trans. And, you know, we're just immediately making the whole world about them being, let's say, trans. Mm-hmm. And what they're really wanting is just to be a person. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of number one. And then get really clear on the agenda. Like, why do I want to be friends with this person? Mm-hmm. Do I want to be friends with this person because she's trans, or do I want to be friends with this person because she's a person and I like her? Mm-hmm. And so really being honest about that too with ourselves. Like, why do I want to be friends? Why do I want to have this conversation with this mom? Is it because, you know, I've got some kind of agenda about what I'm supposed to be and who I'm supposed to be as a Christian? Or is it because I really genuinely care about this person and her personal experience? And with this friend, you know, is it because I really care about that person, human being, and her personal experience, and I actually want to person, whether she was born in a female body or not, want to be her friend? Mm-hmm. So I would start with that. And again, not that there's any right or wrong, you know. Where I come from in nonviolent communication is there is no right or wrong. There's just your your experience, what's alive in you, and I want to know what that is, and I want to know what that is in me too, so that I can be authentic. Yeah.
And I think it's important, and that's part of what I want this whole series to kind of bring to the table, is it's okay for us to just talk about the reality of the experiences.
Yeah.
And let's
Yeah.
just put it out there. And then we
Yeah.
can start kind of sifting and dialoguing and putting pieces together in a way that helps us move forward
Yeah.
authentically and according to overarching truths. In this particular instance, I was so scared to enter the conversation because I'm like, oh no, what if it just goes the wrong way, and like I'm not really ready to ask all these questions. And I felt like, a wall had kind of been put up against me for not diving in head first with like excitement and acceptance and asking questions about the sexual identity components and the choices of sexual behavior and things like that. So it can be kind of messy, but I like what you're saying with the transparency, because it's like maybe something I could have said then is like, hey, I'm really excited to get to know you, but I'm just going to be honest, I feel a little overwhelmed because I just don't want there to end up being like awkwardness or tension if the conversation takes a bad turn. So can we just take it slow with getting to know each other and maybe see, how it went from there?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so, and really not making any assumptions about a person's behavior,
Mm-hmm.
because, some people put themselves out there really strongly when they have a lot of fear and they're actually totally uncomfortable with it. That could be a response. And then some people, it's because they're processing and they really want help processing. And some, so there could be a whole bunch of reasons why and motivations about, how somebody's presenting. And so the thing is to just keep coming back to self, like how recognizing the assumptions that I'm making about this person's behavior, that this means that they want this or they want that. It's like, oh, wow, I'm making an assumption about that. I don't actually know.
Right.
And so just recognizing any judgments that I might be making, and then going back to how is this affecting me?
Mm-hmm.
How am I being affected? And, and that's that place. And what are my fears? What are the fears that are coming up for me?
Mm-hmm.
And then, what you said, just totally being authentically transparent. It's like, this conversation that you're starting, like, this is totally new for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm playing you now, like, wow, this is totally new for me. And I don't know what to do with this. And I'm wondering, would you be willing to just kind of like keep trying, or I don't know. I feel like I need a guide in how to have this kind of conversation. And I kind of want to, and I'm worried about you. I'm worried about me. I'm just kind of a mess. And do you want to be my partner in this mess? Because you might be dealing with your own mess. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you have that in you to kind of have a relationship with somebody who's so uncertain and confused. Do you? Because if you do, I'm totally willing, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm totally willing to try, So that's kind of where I might go with that. Is that?
No, I love that. I wish I wish we'd had this conversation back then. Well, no, and it also brings to my mind, one thing I love from my philosophical studies is like the Socratic dialogue. And it's like, if you want to figure something out, just keep asking the questions. And like you were saying, in talking with my mom friend, like just ask genuine questions and just see what the other person really has to say and bring to the table. And it's like, maybe now I look back and I could have asked, what is it that what kind of questions are you really wanting me to ask? Like, what does that mean for you? What would you like, and why, would you like me to want to know more about?
Right. And being, just remembering, especially in these difficult conversations, if you think the person has the capacity to hear, it can really be connecting to really share your own experience too. Like, I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you asking questions and I'm feeling scared, and checking in, like, do you have that? Like, can you handle that? Can you handle me being scared?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know. And same with your mom friend. It's just like, if you hear something that is in conflict with your truth, or in conflict, that brings something up in you, to really be authentic about you. Because what gets people to turn off and to withdraw is when I start telling them about them, when I start talking about them,
Mm-hmm.
and about some kind of universal truth, and I'm applying it to them. But if I stick with me, like, oh man,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to be honest here. When you say that, I feel a little bit scared. Like, I feel some tension in my body, and I even feel some resistance, and I'm going to keep listening, and I'm going to keep myself open. And I want you to know that I do feel some resistance, and I'm worried that that's going to affect our conversation, and I don't want it to. But really being authentic, because about and transparent, because I know that you're very connected to your body, and whether we say it or not, if I feel resistance in my body, it's going to show. It's going to show, even if I'm like, oh, really, it's still going to come out. And so to name it, be like, oh, I just felt some fear. I just felt some resistance. And to let that other person know, and then say, so if, because they saw it, they sensed it. So if I bring it out and say, yep, that just happened, and I'm going to stay open because I really want to, I'm still going to listen. And I'm working with that resistance, so it's not a threat to you. Because if I see you start to shut down, or if I see signs that maybe of anger or questioning, I might start to feel unsafe, because I'm reading the language, I'm reading your body. But if you say to me, yeah, I am feeling a little bit, I am feeling some anger, I am feeling some resistance, and I'm going to work with it to stay open to you. Is that okay with you? And that person, then you give them that space of like, no, I don't, I just actually don't feel safe. No, I need a break. Or, okay, yeah, I'm going to trust you that you're taking care of this. And thank you for letting me know, because I did notice that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really being authentic, like what's happening in you, like this coworker friend is affecting you. So rather than trying to, that's where we kind of, that agenda where we're trying to manipulate the other person and figure out what's going on with them. You don't know. And that can be scary to a person, whether you have the best of intentions or not. So to really be like, I don't know what to do with this right now. I'm actually having a struggle.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. And I think, we can all probably relate to this. I know I've had this happen countless times, where you start living in a story that you're creating based on how you're interpreting what's being said and what's happening in body language. And you just live in your head, and you're like, you have all this worry and fear and relational tension that really doesn't have to be there if we can kind of tune in better with ourselves and be able to be more vulnerable and honest. And I really love the language you used about sitting with the mess, because, and as a Christian, like, that's also the thing. Christ became incarnate. He stepped right into our reality and all the messiness of it. And he had a purpose and an agenda, and it's for our good. That's what we believe, right? And the whole dialogue, in a way, is also not us as Christians going, well, let's get together and figure out what we're going to do about all this, but more like asking Christ to like give us the guidance. Like, we know you've given us this, that, and the other thing to guide us in truth and living this life in the way you intend, in a way that's going to lead to happiness for us. But here's the messy reality. So talk to us, like, how do we live this out and be comfortable with some of the mystery and the mess and the tension, and trust that you're going to sort it out. But that we're still trying to honor you and follow what we ought to.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is that when somebody, I think that where the conversations can shut down, and just in my experience in witnessing, let's say, a conversation between somebody who's who is a very kind of by the book, strict Christian, or they see fundamentalists, let's say, they see themselves that way, and somebody else about an issue like this, is when either person starts talking about, well, this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. And rather than talking about this is the way it affects me, and this is the fears that it brings up in me, the reason why I care about this so much, this is what I'm afraid of, and I believe that the passion comes forward because people's personal identity is at threat. Mm-hmm. And so, to be honest, no matter what side you're on, is, when I hear you say that, it scares the crap out of me, because I don't get it. I'm so confused. Because everything that I know tells me to be open and, to be compassionate. And at the same time, everything I know tells me that you're supposed to, not have, you're supposed to live with the body that you were born in, let's say. So I'm confused. I don't know what to do. And to stay honest about that, and honest, like, I think that when the more resistance people have to the way somebody else is behaving and choosing the other people's choices, the more it is that they're seeing that person's choice as a threat to their own personal identity and their own questioning. And so to own that, like, this scares me and my identity and who I am, and I don't know what to do with it. And like you said, just sitting in that mess and like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Am I supposed to change you? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what it is to be, let's say, a representative of God. I don't know. And I'm scared. Mm-hmm. Just be honest about that, and as much as possible. And I do want to say something, just kind of I'm concerned personally, like there may be people watching this who might be thinking, oh, well, that I'm coming from one perspective and trying to get people to let go of their beliefs or because I don't believe that or anything like that. And so I want to say is everything that I've said is true for both sides, for any part of the conversation. If we're talking about like a fundamentalist Christian belief system, and then somebody who maybe has an atheist belief system, whatever that is, both people have these fears, and both people can be resistant and judgmental, and we're all just people. We're not, no matter where we're coming from.
Thank you so much. I love it. I'm glad you added those things for us at the end. Would you mind letting everybody know how they could keep in touch with you or follow you?
Oh, sure. So you can always email me at liesbet@bickett.net, which I assume that you'll put some kind of link because it's probably hard to spell. But and then my website is sacredconnections.space. So you can find me there too. And on Facebook, Liesbet Bickett.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much. Good luck with all of this. I really look forward to watching the future interviews.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.